Well, welcome back to the next session at the Centre Court MBA Festival. I hope that you've enjoyed the chat sessions with admissions officers from Stanford, Michigan and other schools and asked them those tough questions that I steered clear of during our panel together. But no such luck for this group. I'm going to ask all of the tough questions that have been building up during the day. You've also had the chance to watch some of the alumni interviews that we've done, which remind me why I'm such a believer in the MBA, you know, such a talented group of individuals with a real sense of purpose and so much energy. That's, you know, something in the last 2 days with Centre Court. And I'm spoiled for the panel that we now have, and I think a tremendous amount of energy. I'm delighted to welcome back Rod Garcia. Rod is the Assistant Dean for Admissions at MIT Sloan, who warns us that there's a storm brewing outside, a weather storm. And so if the clouds go dark and there's rain beating down, we might have to step in. The weather might be a little bit brighter in New Haven, where Bruce Delmonico joins us. Bruce is the Assistant Dean for Admissions at the SOM. From Madrid, where the sun is always shining, right, Alia? It's, well, actually, you're based, I guess, in North America. IE has great representation all around the world. And the Canada Office Director. We're delighted to have you with us. Jackie Otto, who has the best weather. She's an Associate Director of Admissions at CMU Tepper. And Lawrence Murray, who's the Senior Assistant Dean of Graduate Admissions at Fordham, the Gabelli School. So welcome to all five of you. Here we are in October, probably perhaps glad to have September behind you, but at the same time, September must be a wonderful, wonderful month in your calendar as you welcome new students onto the campus. That hasn't been the typical September you often enjoy. But Rod, you must be excited to see one of the biggest classes you've ever admitted.
Yes, indeed, 484 students. Some of them many of them are on campus, others are still remote. And so they're waiting for the time to arrive, but very excited to meet most of them, I hope, you know, someday soon when we're able to go back to campus. But yes, very excited about that.
Right, but of course it's a group, and I'm sure this is true of all of your schools. You know, they haven't been waited. You know, even over the summer, they're already connected. They know everybody's stories. You know, there is this tremendous sort of outreach, getting to know one another. They're showing the sort of determination, despite these conditions, to really connect. Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose with Yale, similarly, you've seen applications. They were up, just over 8%, Bruce, to Yale, and a very talented and diverse bunch of 350. There were musicians, dancers. There was a juggler. I'm starting to think that would be a great characteristic for any full-time MBA student. It must be nice after all of the work and such a challenging year to actually see them show up for the first day of class.
Oh, very much so. And 350 is actually our largest class ever. So it's been it's an exciting time to welcome everybody. It is, I think, we kind of a shared bonding experience with all the uncertainty over the summer of what was going to happen. How would the fall start? Would people all be able to get here? Fortunately, the vast majority we started hybrid, but I think 75–80% of the students are actually physically here in New Haven. So we were fortunate, and the rest are kind of slowly getting here between now and the start of second semester. So it's an exciting time. It's been obviously an unusual time, but it is, as you say, very diverse, very talented group, and we're just thrilled to have them here in New Haven.
And of course, everybody would love to spend a year in Madrid, Alia, and you know, IE is one of the top European business schools. It's always an incredibly international class. Whether by plane, by train, they've determinedly come to join you. What's the year been like? I mean, from the European perspective, you've faced the same sort of challenges as the wider industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you all know, Europe, especially in the spring, faced that lockdown overall, and it was incredible to see the determination, as you say, Matt, of our students, transitioning to online right away, instantly, and finding ways to connect and have group activities and club activities and have that social component while they transitioned online. And I think that also, gave a lot of confidence to our incoming students this fall. And they were determined. They didn't want to put their education on hold. They just wanted to still be able to go to Madrid and make the most of their year off.
I suppose that determination was something that obviously you recognized in the admissions process. Will be breaking down the different parts of that application for you to be able to discern that sort of enthusiasm. Now, Jackie, Tepper opened this wonderful new business school campus right in the heart of Carnegie Mellon's campus, but it's probably a little quieter than you hoped that it would be right now.
It definitely is quieter. I've taken some time over the summer to stop in a couple of times to the building. We still have students taking classes in person. Faculty are still there. I stopped by to get my chair as we are working remotely and needed a better support than I had here at my work from home office. But definitely more students are taking advantage of the opportunity to be in person as they can safely. We're following all the rules and regulations that the university has provided, our local government. And our cases of coronavirus are actually very non-existent on campus. We're very proud of that. So students are responding safely. They're following the guidelines, and we hope to have more students gather as we can as the restrictions are lifted. But definitely miss the building. I miss seeing our students in person, contacting them for lunch, or just seeing them as they're going about their day. But hopefully I'll be back on campus very soon.
Right. I'd love to see the little reminder post-it that you note to yourself. Must go and get my office chair. It's true. Here we are, all sitting in front of Zoom screens, but of course we're delighted that you are for the next hour. And Lawrence, New York was one of the first urban centers to really be hit, but learnt a lot of lessons and sort of flattened that curve very quickly. So how has the summer been, and the moment of welcoming the incoming class?
Yeah, the summer's been, it was much busier than I think anyone expected. The last admission cycle was a little longer than most of us expected. So we kept the doors open a little bit longer. And so that made it sort of a dash to the end. But really excited, we enrolled our largest class. We have a relatively small full-time MBA program. Typically we have about 45 students, and we have about 95 to 100 students. So we're really excited about this. We probably have 75% of the students are on campus. Obviously, we're doing social distancing and things as such. One of the really exciting things is that because of the situation, rents in New York City are like at an all-time low, and students were able to secure housing right near campus. So even though we're not necessarily on campus full-time because we're hybrid, I actually live near campus, and so I get a chance to see quite a few of the students just sort of walking about in the neighborhood. So yeah, we're excited, and this is planning for the next year. It's still a little uncertain, but we've learned a lot of lessons. I think moving forward will give us an opportunity to really broaden our horizons in sort of this new landscape.
Now, of course, you've let the cat out of the bag in doubling the class size. The dean is going to turn to you and say, Lawrence, I want you to double again for next year and beyond. But the silver lining that rent in New York has actually gone down. That's great for the students. Now, perhaps one of the consequences, Rod, you had extended deadlines in round 3 and the sort of the flexibility around standardized testing, just to be able to acknowledge the sort of conditions that applicants were facing. As we start a new year, and no doubt discussions that you've had around deferral, situations where people simply couldn't make it this year. Typically an economic downturn, and we see an uptick in numbers. What are you predicting for the year ahead?
Well, I think we're seeing that uptick now. I think this is the recession that we've all been waiting for, but we did not expect it to be like this. So we're definitely seeing an uptick in applications in most of our programs. We had a deadline yesterday and also a deadline last week, and we're up in both programs. So we'll have a very busy fall and busy year, I must add. Yeah.
Right. Now, of course, you bring all of your experience in the industry to sort of say, well, typically we might see this percentage of applications in round 1, and then something in round 2 had introduced a round 3 2-3 years ago. How difficult then is it to forward plan and say, how many offers do we make to this much bigger round 1 group that's just applied yesterday, and still leave room for lots of talented individuals that will be applying to us later in the year?
Right. I mean, that is always a big question for us. And how many will matriculate? We got a lot of deferrals last year, and I think that's something we did not anticipate. And thank goodness for the extended round 3. that we were able to bring in more people to make up for the people who deferred. The big unknown, of course, is at least to us is the GMAT, right? I mean, if there's a second or third wave, some of the test centers might close again, and that means that some people may not have the opportunity to take the test, which is why we took the step to allow people to submit their application without the GMAT or GRE, and not require them to take the test when they're admitted. So this is just forward planning on our part, and this is just for this year. But we'll see what next year will bring us.
Well, of course, I'll never forgive myself if 11 minutes into a panel with so much insight, we jump into standardized tests. Normally it's the last 11 minutes for that, but I will come back to it because obviously it's something that's very much on people's minds. Bruce, I don't know if you ever ask yourself, is admissions an art or a science, but you are juggling, much like one of your applicants that you've just admitted, a good juggler, trying to work out these numbers and how last year might be a predictor for next year. Are you expecting that application volumes will be high this year?
Yeah, maybe I should take some lessons from the juggler just to try and improve how I do my job.
Yeah.
We are, much like Rod, we've already had a deadline. We've seen applications increase. And so we are, we do model, for our year based on past years, and we have a sense of how many applications we'll receive in each round and how many we would admit. We do try to model it so that we, the same application has the same chance of being admitted regardless of what rounds they apply. So there's no advantage to applying early versus late. You just apply when you're ready to apply and don't have to feel like you worry about how to game the system, because that's not part of the equation. This year, again, there's a lot of uncertainty. Will round two, our January round, track the first round? There's, to what Rod said, will there be, a second or third wave? We've seen applications for our first round increase across the board, but more domestically than internationally. Which is it was interesting trend. And, based, we have an election coming up, for example. I don't want to get political, but, based on the outcome of that and policies that might be enacted in the wake of that, that might have an effect on applicant pool as well. So that might be that round two doesn't track round one based on some intervening circumstances. So we do have a model in place, and we are acting based on the best information we have from that model. But obviously we know that this might not be a typical year.
Right. So if that model is just a wet finger in the wind, but it's going to be a very foggy crystal ball for all of us. That said, of course, Alia, as we look back over recent years, demand for European business schools, and for many also that 1 year experience that was very appealing to them. Do you think that that's an enduring trend, and just from sort of application volumes that you've had, this idea of using the MBA to gain a precious international experience?
Yeah, I think it's, been really interesting these last few months. I think there was a lot of uncertainty at first, not knowing with the pandemic what was going to happen and how everything was going to play out. I think now looking ahead to our next intake, which is, it starts in the spring, depending on the program, but our volumes are up and up by a lot. So unlike a lot of US schools, we don't do rounds, we actually do rolling admissions. So applicants apply as soon as they're ready, and the volume is up by a lot. So I anticipate our programs filling up a lot sooner than previous years.
Right, so Rod knows he's got yesterday's deadline, but you could come in on a Monday morning and suddenly find that over the weekend, a whole bunch of applications have come in. A nice way to start the week. Tepper, of course, with that we talked about the convergence of business and technology, and the tech industry, arguably, Jackie, has had a good pandemic in many ways. Certainly, some of the tech giants. Is that something that you see that, with what Tepper is offering, this idea of applicants that really want to build a career that brings business and technology together?
I think that is part of Tepper's sweet spot, and a lot of candidates are seeing that with the progress that the tech industry has had during a very difficult time. Some of our alumni have never been busier working at Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, you name it. So there's a lot of promise for employability for people who are going into the tech industry, and Tepper really provides a strong place for their academic and career opportunities. A lot of product management students I see coming through our application system now, and the academic structure we have at Tepper definitely supports that. So yes, our applications are up 15% about for round one. We anticipate a larger applicant pool, which is good for our office and our team and our student community. We'll be very busy this year, we forecast for the rest of the year.
Right, right. And of course, it had been an unusually strong job market. What unemployment was around 2.5%, and you know that's seen a tremendous jolt. Lawrence, does that mean Bruce was talking about sort of demand domestically? Similar, are you seeing a lot of US applicants that are saying, "Hey, after so many years of a strong job market, this might be a great time to go back to business school"?
Yeah, we are. We're definitely seeing, like in our enrolled class, we flipped. I mean, we saw a significant increase in domestic students. And looking forward, I can see in the applicant pool we're up as well. I can see that there's stronger interest from domestic students. But New York is also a place where you had a lot of international students who are already here in the city, and so we benefit from that. So we're able to achieve some of that global diversity with students or prospective students who are already in the U.S. That's definitely something that benefits us. But yes, I know our career services office is excited to work with the larger group of domestic students. We enjoy working with all students, but there's no doubt that the increase in domestic students has been a drastic shift for us. But we're excited and looking forward. We're very excited to work with some of these companies. And again, it's a new normal, navigating sort of uncharted territories, even with our recruiters. So it's exciting.
Right. I was on panels yesterday with Steve from Tepper, with Ellen from Fordham, I think also with Debbie from Yale, and they've already got this sense, I guess, through internships this summer of some very promising prospects for next year and the job market. Now within that, and Rod, this is not in any way a political platform, and if you look at the FAQs on Sloan's website, you probably at some point have individually answered each and every one of those questions that a candidate has ever put to you. But if you look at the international market, it has been buffeted in the last year or two. Whether it's concerns and uncertainty around H-1B visas, of course, step schools have taken with STEM designation. So do you think that as the year unfolds, and depending on the results post November the 3rd, whenever we find out what those results are and what people will accept, do you think that there's a body of the international pool sort of waiting on those results, and you might see many of them then applying later in the year?
Probably. In fact, in our deadline last week, we've seen an increase in international students. International applications. So we have not seen a decrease at all. So I think we may see more in the coming rounds, in the second and third rounds. But right now, I don't think we've scared them away. I think they're still enticed to pursue their education here in the U.S.
And 3/4 of your class, Bruce, speak at least 2 languages, don't they? So I think a number of the schools have seen that dip in international applications, but fairly confident because, of course, what you offer at Yale and the other top schools, it's a world-class education and incredible opportunities when they graduate in the summer of 2023.
Yeah, and I should clarify. We've seen an increase in international applications. We've just seen an even greater increase in domestic applications. So all elementary school are up. It's just domestic more than international. And it's interesting. It will be interesting to see, what post-election, if there is a shift in that, then based on the outcome. But we, for the incoming class, you mentioned that the 3/4 speak at least 2 languages. We are 40% international, which still down. It's a little bit lower than last year, 44% for the previous class, but not dramatically. And so I think that the interest is still there. The numbers have held firm. And one point I would make, this might be a little bit divergent from when we're talking about applications being up and deferrals. I think there is concern about, are there going to be spaces in the class? Is it going to be one thing to remember is that there's always. You always, if you're a strong applicant, you always will do well. And also remembering the applications are up this year, but we're coming off of a couple of years of declines. So we were up 8% this past year, up looking up again this year, but we're catching up to a dip. So, it's not as though we're getting, the competitiveness is out of the range of where we have been in the past.
Right. Of course, you're a very selective school, Bruce, but should we sort of make an abstraction of those applicant numbers anyway? Because it's one individual, it's one personal story applying to your school. And so irrespective of how many might apply this year, it's really making sure that you do a great job and nail your own application.
Yeah, and I have to say that I think it's an excellent point. It's, you look at the numbers, you look at the averages, but your chance of being admitted is individual. It's not based on the overall selectivity. It's not that we're randomly taking X% of the class of the applicant pool. It's your individual chance of being admitted is specific to you. So I think those numbers can be deceiving, and people can I think be dissuaded or be concerned based on sort of thinking about the pool overall and not thinking about their particular situation.
Right. Now, for a school based in Madrid, probably Spanish students are in a minority, given how international the program is at IE. You were describing, Alia, just how applications have really jumped, and as you look at the intake, just adding to Bruce's comments, you have such a diversity in that class, and so the application really is about stepping back, thinking about my story, my experiences, my accomplishments, and sharing them irrespective of who else might be applying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really, as Bruce mentioned, it really is about, those top candidates are always going to shine through. I think I can speak for all of us here on the panel today. Fit is so important, right? And if you're not the right fit for the school you're applying to, I mean, whether, the applicant pool is massive or if it's smaller, I mean, you still won't be a fit, and chances are you probably wouldn't get in anyway, right? It's one thing to tick all the boxes with your grades and your GMAT score and all of that, but it's about your full profile and your fit for the institution, for the program, and as a future alumni.
Right. Jackie, with other top schools, as you publish a class profile, I always think it's a very dangerous document, because as you talk about average test scores and average GPA and years of experience, and almost as if we were norming all of that and saying, well, I have to have that test score. And if you published height and shoe size, they'd probably say, oh, I need to be a size 11 too. But it's so much broader than that. How do you sort of steer applicants away from data that they naturally look at and say, but what about you?
Yeah, so in conversations with applicants and prospective students, we encourage them to know that they're more than just a number, a GMAT score, or GPA, or years of work experience. There's a lot more that they're bringing to the table, to the program, to the community. And while those are good guidelines to look to see kind of where they are competitively with the pool, it's not a hard and fast thing. Not one thing gets you into the program, not one thing will keep you out. So it's really letting us learn more about them through their application journey that really helps us understand the potential that they have in the program. But it is hard. I know that the applicants are nervous and they're comparing themselves to others. And, when you see those scores, it can be a little intimidating. But again, not one thing will get you into the MBA program and not one thing will keep you out. So it's the whole person that we're looking at when they apply to the program.
Right, and all of you, I guess, as I presented you at the beginning of the panel, all of you work in admissions, right? And none of you have the word rejection in your job title, heaven forbid. But you're looking, there might be a skeleton in the closet, but you're looking at all of those positive aspects that an applicant brings. Now, we talk about shoe size and how an individual fills those shoes. Lawrence, I suppose your assessment is very similar to sort of holistic, the different elements, and really getting a sense of the drive, the personality, and also making sense of where business school fits at this stage of their personal and professional development.
Absolutely. Taking a look at all of those dimensions of who they are on paper and beyond, and really thinking about their sort of short-term, midterm, and long-term goals and objectives. We always tell students, it's about you fitting with us and us fitting with you. So as much as we're interviewing them, they're also interviewing us. And I think I speak for all of us. We want all of these students to be successful. So they may not be successful at our school, but we also want them to walk away from our experiences still with confidence that the MBA is still a tool that can help them achieve their long-term goals and objectives. So yeah, that holistic, and I actually think moving forward, it's even more important for them to start to think about, that fit. This is before we were really restrained, like campus visits, we were restrained by travel, and people couldn't make it to campus, to check out, the schools, and a lot of people were applying sight unseen. Now, it's really, you'd have to be hard pressed to not be able to find a way to interact with one of our schools virtually. And we're all doing virtual campus tours. We're all doing virtual information sessions, coffee chats, meetups with alums, meetups with students. And there's a level of interactivity and access that students just simply didn't have before. So I think moving forward, it's going to be even more important for those prospective students to really articulate, that fit and sort of why they're choosing the business school and why they're choosing us and why they're choosing an MBA at this particular time in their lives.
Right, with that idea that Lawrence brings up and all of these initiatives to be able to connect with applicants, perhaps just a question to all of you and the approaches that you've used. What have you found to be particularly effective, or that applicants have said, hey, this was a great way to get to know you? Has it been coffee chats with alums, sort of virtual tours? What seems to have resonated as people have looked to better get to know your institutions?
Well, I won't give this secret sauce away, but they've been very creative about reaching us to us. I mean, nowadays, you can reach out to any of us, right? They've got their they have our email addresses, so they reach out and they let us know when they've submitted their application, and it's FaceTime, right? But it's through email. But before we shift to another topic, I just wanted to put numbers of applications in perspective, because I didn't want to scare people away because we're up this year. Keep in mind that most of us were flat or down last year in round one. So any increases this year, it's an improvement from last year, right? So the key really is round three, because that's where we got a lot of applications. Now, will we see the same volume in round three? Now, that is a big, unknown to us. So did not want to scare people away by thinking that, maybe this is not the year because everyone's applying. But I just want to put that application increase in perspective for everyone.
Yes, and there was such a shock to the global system as we look at the late winter and early spring of last year that led to such high round three applicant numbers, the extended deadlines that you all then very flexibly provided. But I mean, you'd commented, I guess, if you look over what a 5-year trend, Bruce, you talked about sort of forecasting and looking at previous numbers. You have to go back to what, sort of 2016, 2015, even when schools were having record numbers. So it can be misleading to see double-digit growth year on year this year.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And so we saw a dip, we're catching up. So I think, to Rod's point, I don't think it's a situation where you see an increase this year and you think, oh, all hope is lost. You come back with Alia and others' points that, we look at the individual, and it's your individual chance, and top candidates always have a strong chance of being admitted. And Lawrence's wonderful point about the fact that obviously we want students to be coming to our schools, but I think we're also advocates for the degree generally, for graduate management education, and I think there's space for people in every program. So I think that's an important point. That's right. In terms of getting back to your question about formats, Rod's not sharing the secret sauce. We don't have any secret sauce. I don't know if we've cracked the code, but we've tried to have a diversity of opportunities. We have master classes with faculty, interviews with alumni, Q&A sessions with students, virtual tours, really trying to give people choice. And I think it is, well, the nice thing is, again, Lawrence made this point, it's democratizing. Before, we always had online events, but we also traveled, and it was, it did value and advantage people who happen to be in the cities where we traveled to. And now we can be in touch with people who are everywhere, and I think that is really a nice thing, and hopefully that will translate into the classroom as well.
And you're starting to see sort of connections with parts of the world that, it made no sense to organize a trip there, but now there's a dialogue with individuals in those markets.
Exactly, and we've always been incredibly global, and that's been an important part of what we're about, and I think that's the same with all our schools, but hopefully global in maybe an even more meaningful way than we had been in the past.
Right. Jackie, Steve was saying how committed Tepper alumni have been, even for the job market, that the graduating class of 2020 have shown. But similarly with admissions, Bruce was talking about their availability and willingness to talk with individuals. Is that something that you're seeing? And beyond the admissions team, it's that wonderful alumni support?
Yes, I love working with our alumni. I am the contact person on the admissions team that partners with alumni relations. And over the summer, they were the first ones to say, how can we help? What can we do? They hosted coffee chats, virtual dinners. We had alumni participating like all over the world, Australia, Turkey, China, Japan, Brazil, Canada, everywhere. All the corners of the world were represented to reach out to students to say, hey, you're going to get through this. It's going to be challenging. It'll be memorable experience and hopefully many good ways too. But our alumni were the first ones to say, what can we do? And they're still doing it. They're still engaging with our current students by, presenting for their companies, recruiting students. I just had an event on Friday for LGBTQ alumni and current students for the Reaching Out conference. And it was great to have those folks connect with the current students as they're going through this process now. But alumni have been incredible and very valuable support for our students' perspective and current.
Right. It's lovely the way that you frame it. It's not you saying help, it's them proactively coming to you and saying, how can we help, right? It speaks volumes about them. Alia, I guess as applicants from all over the world are looking to do that sort of research, that they can use LinkedIn as a tool to try to find alumni from the school. And any advice that you have in terms of saying, well, think of it also in terms of not just perhaps where you're from or the profession that you work in, but what you would love to bring to our community. If they're passionate about social enterprise or Italian cooking, it could be so many different things. But are there ways to then identify alumni that perhaps had been the president of the social enterprise clubs, or just sort of individuals perhaps that have shared those passions?
Yeah, we have so many ways to connect with our alumni around the world. We have 31 offices around the world that, are connected to our local alumni. So I think, especially, here in North America, it's very easy for us to connect to, these local alumni and create these connections with applicants. We've done events, over the last few months, like cooking classes where alumni are there, or we had an alumni who's a performing artist do a live music night, and kind of that was with alumni and prospective students. So we've done a lot of these types of events, even those who are experts in their industry giving talks instead of only just professors. So it creates a bit of that interaction so they can see the different sides of our alumni and not just who they are, or rather their experience at IE, which we also do provide. We do a lot of one-on-one connections. We do group chats, virtual sessions online, but we try and broaden it a little bit so that they do have more of that exposure, and often that connection is made through us, as through the different offices, the admissions offices, or even just through our online events.
You mentioned the cooking classes. I'm joining some dots here because Rod had talked about special sauce, and he's in that beautiful kitchen of his that serves now as his office. Is it that you drive yield up by cooking for applicants to the program? You'd have 100% yield if you did that, Rod, wouldn't you?
Well, they have to cook for themselves, so we just help them get there.
With yesterday's deadline, and I guess one of the other realities of mobility or the virtual platforms, interviewing. So as you look at all of the round one applicants from yesterday, Rod, how are you now organizing interviews? And does it give you more flexibility where previously if an alum had been doing an interview with someone in that same geography or part of the world, that now, of course, you could organize interviews with respectful time zones, but connect different people. How are you approaching interviews?
Right. So I just gave my interview schedule yesterday to the office. So I think first of all, I think there's an acceptance of more acceptance of Zoom interviews. In the past we would avoid Zoom or Skype because, people thought that maybe it's, maybe that's not showing enough interest, but I think now it's, it is acceptable. The good thing about Zoom interviews is, first of all, I just want to clarify that we do interviews ourselves, not our alumni. So we do travel around the world,
Right.
but we have limited days away, and so we can't interview as many people. But that's changed now, right? We're no longer bound to our travel calendar, so you're not wasting a day traveling 2 hours. You could use that time to interview 8 or 10 people. So, and you can reach out to more people than in the past. So,
yeah. By the time you get to Logan Airport, you could have done 4 Zoom interviews, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, from experience, Bruce, it's a generation, and we've all had 6 or 7 months that we've just spent on Zoom. But are there any sort of reassurances or just advice, from the experience? It's high stakes. People realize they've reached that interview stage. The school's clearly interested in them, and as Lawrence said, it's two-way. That interview. So what would your advice be to sort of prepare a Zoom interview?
Yeah, I think it does come across as high stakes, and I think one thing is every school does it a little bit differently in terms of who's interviewing, what the interview looks like, what information they have about the candidate. Like Rod, we have students doing the interviews, or did you say students or did you do it, Rod? Staff. I've already forgotten.
Staff,
right? So we have students. We do some. It's they have the resume. They haven't seen the whole application, so it varies from school to school. So I think the one thing is just know what the format is for the school you're interviewing with. But I think I guess the reassuring thing is, it's for us at least. I think applicants see so much an essay. They see the essay as the last thing they do before they submit the application, and therefore must be the most important. And the interview is the last thing that you do before you get your admission decision. So it must be the most important. It must be, if I do well, I get in. If I don't do well, I don't get in. And it's not that simple. The way we do it is the interview gets added to your application. It's reviewed and considered as another element. We talk about the holistic review, another element. It doesn't, to Jackie's point, no one thing makes or breaks your application. And the interview is same with the interview. So it's not as though it's an up or down depending on how well you do in the interview. We actually, it is a two-way conversation. We're obviously evaluating you, but you're also evaluating us and getting information about our program and whether this is a place you want to be. We definitely treat it that way, but it's definitely something that is, I think again, I analogize it to the essay. People put I think more weight on it than they should. It's one piece. It's not the most important piece. It's not the thing that will determine the outcome. And I think just not overthinking it, looking at, in terms of preparation for us, looking at your resume, going back through your application, having examples of successes and failures that you've had, being ready for those kinds of behavioral questions, I think is the best way to prepare. But there are no trick questions. We're not going to ask you to sort of market size or how many jelly beans fit in the Eiffel Tower or whatever it is, which would be weird because the Eiffel Tower is not enclosed. Infinite. But I think approaching it that way, hopefully,
I mean, Lawrence, I guess conversely, if you've invited somebody for an interview, obviously you're already interested and you see the quality and caliber of their profile. Have you found yourself in a situation where the candidate just nailed it, whether it was a sense of self-awareness, presence for that interview, and you walked away saying, yeah, we absolutely want this person in the classroom?
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to an interview that I did a couple of days ago, actually, with a young man who had sort of weathered a pretty tough storm over the last 6 months. And, I think that's going to be an important part of the story, of anybody's story, sort of moving forward for fall of 2021 or beyond, is sort of how they weathered this COVID storm and sort of what did this mean to them in their career, their decision to pursue an MBA, their sense of self-awareness and professionalism, and that emotional and professional maturity. So I think, if I'm thinking back to that particular interview, I mean, this young man just had really put a lot of thought into sort of how the MBA fits into his goals. He was very authentic in sharing the challenges that he faced in his job, sort of coming out of the spring and sort of having to make some decisions a little earlier, a little faster than what I think he originally planned. I think he probably was planning to go to an MBA maybe 1 year or 2 years from now, but that timeline was a bit accelerated, and how he was prepared for that acceleration. So I think, in that sense, I think he nailed it. He presented very well. He took advantage of all sorts of activities, online activities that we did in the summer, sort of to get a jump start on the fall recruiting. And so we were excited to see that he took advantage of that. He was very patient. I think schools are still learning how to navigate all of this stuff. And there are still some quirks and idiosyncrasies. Zoom doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. And, depending on where you are in the world, the technology and the bandwidth it can be a little wonky. So yeah, I think he nailed it. He definitely epitomizes an applicant in this sort of new landscape.
Yes, yeah, and this COVID generation, Alia, whether they're applying to your program that starts in the spring, all of those individual circumstances, whether they were furloughed, perhaps they worked in the airline industry or tourism and any number of things. Do you encourage transparency? I mean, as an admissions office, you understand that in a global crisis like this, there are contexts and situations beyond an individual's control.
Absolutely. I think transparency is key. As Lawrence mentioned, being authentic, being yourself. And part of that is being transparent, giving that full picture, but also showing what you learned out of these hard times, showing perhaps, resilience or adaptability or how you've been able to pivot or the agility that you've been able to demonstrate. I think it's the learnings out of difficult situations are what's going to set you apart from then just, saying, okay, this happened and it wasn't good. And I think that can really show character and show, the true version of yourself.
Right. I'd love to think that the 4-letter word of admissions had become grit. It used to be GMAT, and Jackie, in previous panels, we would dutifully, I would ask you, well, GMAT, GRE, do you weigh them both the same? Is the preference for one test over another? In many ways, I think that the number of GRE test takers admitted to this year's classes, schools have between 30, 37, 38% GRE test takers. You as schools have answered that question. Oh, really? We're comfortable with both tests. Nevertheless, it's been a year where those tests have shifted to online test centers. Lawrence was describing bandwidth, and that's been an issue. People where the lights have gone out and the computer has stopped, they've ended up having to take this test 2 or 3 times. So are you looking at GMAT and GRE scores any differently this year, given the circumstances of online testing?
I will say, first of all, just to commend our partners to provide these tests online to our applicants. I mean, it is a lot that they had to do to shift to that platform, and we're just very thankful that that happened. With the uncertainty of going forward for MBA applicants, we were, in a holding pattern to figure out what we were going to do. But they definitely, went through a lot of hurdles and struggles to make that all happen. We're very thankful. So going forward, the GRE or GMAT, we are accepting both, as well as the executive assessment. Whatever the student decides to take is up to them. In historical past, we've had more GMAT test takers, but it's really the student choice to what they would like to use. But with the online formats, it's providing access to people to apply for an MBA that maybe would have had a lot more challenges to get to that testing center before. So we're really excited about the access that people are having with the online format. And we are evaluating it the same as we have in years past. So, and again, it's one part of their application. It's not everything, but it is something that we use for the academic assessment for our candidates.
Right. And you've introduced the EA, and it was a question from someone in our audience. EA and GMAT, you're equally comfortable with scores from the two?
Yes, definitely. So again, it's a student choice. Though the GMAT may be preferred, we accept the GRE or executive assessment this year.
Great. Now, Rod, you'd opened this Pandora's box 33 minutes ago in mentioning GMAT. Perhaps what I'd like to look at, you shared that clarity in terms of for this year,
Yeah.
Those tests optional.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps many are then saying, well, if I don't have that test score and there's another applicant that does have a strong score, that may weigh against me. So can you perhaps just expand in terms of the things that you're ultimately looking for and that gave you the confidence to take this decision and say, we have other great ways to assess your ability to thrive in our classroom?
Right. First of all, I'll have to mention that during our past deadline, only a few people submitted their application without the test score. The majority of the applicants have a test score, whether it's GMAT or GRE. So most of them do have the GRE. I think there's this misapprehension that GMAT is everything, that GMAT is the ultimate decider of decision. We use it as a filter, right? I mean, you look at the score, but we will look at a lot of things. Most people think that their grades don't matter. They still matter. Grades still matter. GPAs still matter. Those courses in economics and calculus, matter. Your major, matters. The trends in your grades, all of those things matter. So grades in combination with the GMAT, gives us an idea of how someone would perform in a school. GMAT alone does not tell us anything. But you have to look at it with another factor. I'm very old school, and I'm always a believer that that grades are a good predictor of how someone will perform in a classroom. So a four-year effort I think is a better predictor than a 4-hour test.
Right. Yeah. But it's optional. And then, of course, in those circumstances, you're then looking for ways. It could be the CFA level 1. It could be
exactly
that calc or accounting statistics course that you took that will convince you of the credentials and the quality of the candidate.
Absolutely. But also, you just wanted to remind everyone that the rest of MIT, most of MIT has also suspended the GRE. And even our undergraduate admissions office has suspended SAT this year. So we're not alone in this.
Well, we describe this as a petri dish, and your confidence, you've already seen it with round 3 admits that you've welcomed and how they will thrive in the program. So it'll be interesting to continue to follow that. Bruce, we sort of spoke earlier about the musicians and the dancers. Very often that's down at the bottom of a resume. The wonderful, that's where I love to start reading a resume and would love to know where you like to start. But there is great research that shows that, the right side of our brains, that's all sort of creativity, storytelling, narrative, these are leadership skills. So if someone has that musical ability, and they think, well, I played the piano, but the school won't be interested in that. You are, right? Or both in terms of a passion, a creative expression. So what can those bottom lines of a resume really tell you in the admissions office?
Yeah, that's where I tend to start as well. My eyes gravitate to the bottom to see what those, what quirky, interesting things are there. And I think you're right. There is, people think about business school, they think it's a kind of a sort of rigid rote education, but I think, certainly, at Yale, and I think at all our schools, creativity is important, and we teach, we have a very multi-sector approach for educating leaders for business and society, and we want people to think very broadly about their careers and how they can have impact, and also about how they can solve problems. It's not just about sort of plugging something into a formula and it's pre-existing formula. It's figuring out the solution to the problem that doesn't exist yet. I think that's right. I think the challenge is, from an admissions perspective, how we evaluate and how we think about that. I think, you talked earlier about, art versus science. And I do think that, and we've talked about fit, and I do think there's a concern. I tend to maybe grab a little bit more like Rod in terms of a little old school. I think there's a concern from admissions officers, and there's a common sense that, we can see see into your souls and see through individuals, and we can we can divine who you are based on looking at a resume or looking at just a few pieces of information. I think we have to be, at least I know at Video, we definitely try to make sure we have a humility about what we're doing. We try to be rigorous about how we're approaching it, the admissions process, because I worry, I understand fit is, can be part of it, but I think fit, those conclusory determinations can also mask bias, mask prejudice in terms of how you approach things. And that's why we try to look at not just those conclusions, but the behaviors that underpin that we're looking for. And so creativity, to your point, very long-windedly getting back to it, how do we see that? How do we find creativity, and how do we evaluate that consistently across applicants, and not just see the person who happens to have juggling at the bottom of their resume and say, okay, they're creative, whereas someone else maybe has something equally creative but just didn't put that on there. So we try to caution, we want those qualities, we want those students to be broad-minded and creative, but we want to make sure we're evaluating that consistently. So so putting practice into place that captures that information and evaluates it in a way that doesn't just depend on what people have to put on the bottom of the resume, I think is an important part of the process.
Right. I'm crestfallen, of course, that you don't have divine knowledge, Bruce, but I'm thinking if someone can build the Eiffel Tower out of jelly beans, that would be a great creative alternative. So, Lawrence, you had spoken about this impressive young man that you interviewed just a couple of weeks ago, for whom sort of accelerated, now thinking about business school this year, perhaps rather than a year, 2 years from now. One of the possible consequences, he hasn't had the chance to save. People are thinking, well, it's a big investment. So, what are you doing in terms of scholarships or just discussions around financial aid to make this investment in the MBA as accessible as possible, given the circumstances?
Yeah, we've been on an upward trend, I think, for many of our programs in terms of scholarships. I think, as my colleagues had mentioned before, we're coming off of more than a couple of years of down applications. So I think many of us had made that pivot or built that more direct connection between scholarship support and an increase in application volume, or at least an increase in the conversion into matriculants. So, we had to accelerate that ourselves. This year, I think we probably spent a little more than what the dean wanted to spend in scholarships, but we got a great class, and again, we learned a lot from this, and so we I have a commitment from the dean and our board of advisors and the university to continue to fund MBA scholarships. We have a few different scholarship avenues now. So we have different types of scholarships to support, diversifying our class across a wide spectrum of attributes. We also have increased the number of scholarship funds that we give to continuing students. So once they've matriculated into the program, they have the opportunity to apply for continuing student scholarships as well as graduate assistantships as another way to support the students' goals to complete their MBA and to help fund their MBA.
Right. I suppose at the heart of that question, Alia, there was also this sense of timing. Not just why business school, but why now? Do I defer these plans for a year or two? When you're discussing with potential applicants, what is your advice in terms of taking that step and applying in the next year versus a couple of years from now? Certainly, the idea of graduating as the world gets back on its feet in 2022 or 2023, there will be any number of opportunities for those classes.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time to be going back to school. It's this, real life learning environment where, you're bringing what's going on in the world right into the classroom. And it's the most amazing thing ever. Our professors are bringing in, our professors, they are practitioners as well. They work in the industries they teach. And so they're bringing in challenges that they're dealing with, with the companies they're working with, bringing that into the classroom, and they're co-creating live. And I think that's something incredible. I personally actually did my MBA during the economic downturn of 2008, 2009, and it was very similar. So I see this almost paralleling that, but in a very different way. So I see it really exciting. I think it's a perfect time to retool, upskill, and just broaden out the skill set that you have.
When I speak to many students and alumni, you're brilliant individuals, talented, determined, a real privilege to talk to them. But there's often sort of a theme that comes up where they'll describe, how do we describe, an imposter syndrome. Now, Jackie, whether that's someone that looks at the school and says, but it's all tech at CMU, right? I'm not sure. The school excites me, but I'm not sure, if it's the right place for me, or if I'll be smart enough. And yet, of course, if you're admitting them into the program, you're helping to make that decision for them. So, how do you help to overcome that sense of imposter syndrome?
I would say, I get that question a lot with students coming into the program. Like, they meet their classmates and they're just stunned and amazed by the caliber of the students in the community. And we remind them that you're amongst that. You've gotten yourself to this place. You are here. There's potential in your growth here, and what you bring to the community is valuable. Our Accelerate Leadership Center does a wonderful job in supporting our students with confidence, presenting and communicating effectively, sort of overcoming this feeling that maybe I'm not good enough. Did I deserve to be here? But we definitely get that with the students in the beginning of the program, but quickly on, I think they rid themselves of that feeling after they've had some of these workshops and development and become these really strong communicators and leaders in our program. So initially we see that maybe in August, but I think usually by the end of September, I've seen a very different person through their growth with some of the workshops and development we have with our Leadership Center.
Right. Now, of course, it's not for any one group. In many of those conversations, young women that said, "Oh, business school, should I be investing in myself?" We had talked in the spring, Rod, about with all of the efforts that schools have made to achieve a level of gender balance in the MBA classroom, and for many schools it has been a percentage that has dropped, not by big numbers, but still, it's there. And I take Bruce's point from earlier. Last year and comparing this year, obviously, quite different things. But, is there a concern, or do you feel that longer term, the compelling reasons for women to go to business school remain the same?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure that everyone shares this concern that, oh, that's a very lovely potential applicant. Yes, I think it's something that we're all concerned. I mean, not just women, but all types of diverse applicants, right? So we want them on the table. We want them, in the classroom. So we're making huge efforts to recruit not just them, but in fact, just today, we looked at our numbers, despite the fact that we've had increases in applications. We had to look at where can we get more folks, right? So certain regions, certain countries. So while we're up in certain countries, we're also down in other countries. So I think that's part of what we're doing now, is to bring in more diverse candidates, and of course women, is part of that formula.
Right. Lawrence, you've worked for a number of top schools. So an old hat in the industry. What do you love about your job?
I really love seeing, I think one of my colleagues mentioned it. I love seeing the transformation in these students. We're able to build relationships with these students, 1 year ahead, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years sometimes. And to see them evolve and to see them grow as individuals, to see them grow as professionals, and then to come to school and to overcome that imposter syndrome, right? We start in the summer. So we have a big onboarding program called Gabelli Launch in the summer, and they jump right into a student consulting project. And most of them, although it was digital, their eyes are really big and they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't even really started business school yet. And you're throwing me into this student consulting project. But to watch them go through this and sort of learn about themselves, learn about their classmates, and now, sort of in COVID, learning about how to deal with ambiguity, managing virtual teams, managing communication, problem solving, conflict resolution and negotiation, all in the digital space, and to see them grow, I got to tell you, that's what gets me up in the morning. And then to see them go off and flourish as alums, in 5 or 6 years, then they're back hiring students, or they're serving as guest speakers in the classroom, or sponsoring internships or full-time jobs. So that's what really gets me going.
Because I think as we complete this panel, there is a sentiment that I would love to echo that I've heard from this incoming class, and it's one of gratitude. My gratitude, of course, to all 5 of you for joining us on this panel. But when you talk to this class that has been through such levels of uncertainty in the last 7 months, the joy that they're now starting the next chapter in their life, the sort of development that you then get to witness at Lawrence, they say how grateful we are, and really, we've reached a point perhaps 7 months into the pandemic, and it's wonderful. So I echo their gratitude to the 5 of you. This has been such a tough and challenging year. You emerge smiling, optimistic, hopeful, incredibly warm, and incredibly encouraging. And I think that alone, for all of our viewers to be able to get that sense. Thank you for your insights, of course, but just for that warmth and encouragement. Thanks for joining us at Centre Court.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck to everyone.
Best of luck.